Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that passes wisdom to the next generation of athletes, coaches, and parents. And today's guest is the one and only Stephen Mackey. Stephen is a player development coach, keynote speaker, and founder of 2 Words Character Development, one of the top leadership and character curriculums in the country. In our conversation today, we discuss his character curriculum, his 6 pillars, ways that coaches can reward the behaviors that they want to see. We talk about the number one issue athletes are facing in the country and so much more. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast, Stephen. I'm thrilled for our conversation today to talk and connect the dots between sports and life lessons. I know that character development is big for me, and I know obviously it's big for you. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's dive right in. The first question we ask all of our guests is, what is your definition of impactful leadership?
When I think about leadership and specifically impactful leadership, I think of just the simple idea that you would give the best of you for the best of someone else, that you would deploy your talents, your abilities, your resources, your influence in service of another person. And it's, you think about how we see the exact opposite of that so often. We see people who will exploit their talent, exploit their position, exploit their resources for their own gain, to be one who in sports, on a team, in a family, in the game of life, deploys the best of themselves in service of someone else. To me, regardless of title or position, is someone who's qualified to be an impactful leader.
I think that's an important point. And before we dive into the 2 Words Character Development and story, I actually would like you to share a little bit on what do you think the difference is? Because I was having this conversation with my dad a while ago too on like the difference between like transformational leaders and like transactional leaders, right? And exploiting and taking, like if it's a coach and they have a great player, they take advantage of that great player and they don't transform them. What do you think great leaders do instead of that?
Again, I think it comes down to what is the end goal. When I work to advance only myself, then I may or may not advance only myself. When I work to advance another, this upside down truth comes to life in that when I work to serve other people, then I get and I grow myself. That I think it was Zig Ziglar said, you can have anything you want in life if you just help enough other people win. And the wisdom of the godfather of motivation makes sense right there. That in coaching, when we coach to help our kids win, then our kids win and we win. When we coach to only win for ourselves and we use our kids, sure, we may advance in our career. We may get that next position, that stepping stone. But I don't know that we actually really win, because what we leave in the wake is students who have broken hearts, students who have placed their trust and then had it broken. We leave students with a hardened heart instead of a prepared heart. And so I don't know that we can win when we try to exploit others for our own gain.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and is a great kind of bridge and segue to, I would love to hear about your story of founding 2 Words and building 2 Words character development so you can transform the lives and have that correct winning end goal for athletes and honestly schools and just people that are behind the athletes.
So I started 2 Words character development in 2017, January 12th to be exact. And I was sitting on my couch outside of Dallas, Texas, and a buddy of mine said, man, your favorite part of the week is when you get to work with athletes. Because I'd volunteered for 7 years as a player development coach with a local high school football team in my community. And he said, your favorite part of the week is when you get to do that. That's the thing you love the most. We had started posting videos online of some of the locker room talks. And he said, man, people love hearing you do that. I said, man, I think you can make a living doing that. And I said, James, I give 7-minute talks before football games. You don't make a living doing that. And he gave me the best piece of advice. He said, Mac, don't start with no, start with yes. If you knew it would work, what would you do? And the power behind that advice was just that simple truth that where you focus, you finish. That when you start with no, you'll find all the reasons that you can't do something. But when you start with yes, then you start to see all the reasons why it could be possible. And then you start to act like it. And then growth follows. And so as I said, well, if I knew it would work, I'd make a video-based curriculum so that I could be the player development coach for every school in the state of Texas. And it'd have a 7 to 10 minute video lesson. There'd be a workbook with lessons for coaches and captains, athletes, and the family. I'd make new lessons every year, make it a subscription base, and I'd be the player development coach for every school in the state of Texas. And he said, great, man, you got a plan, go do it. And so I went to my wife and said, what do you think? And she said, I think you can do it. You'll be great at it. And I said, perfect, because I just quit my job, so we're all in. And over the next few months, I thought, man, I got to find 30 schools, and I'll speak, I'll preach on Sundays. And very quickly we hit 30 schools and then 100 schools, and now we're in over 1,000 schools in the state of Texas alone, schools in 13 other states across the U.S. And it's just been a great privilege to get to speak to the smallest of schools all the way to national champions at, Clemson and Oklahoma and these massive big time programs and everywhere in between. But at the heart of it is a simple idea that championship people win championships. And I believe that with all of our heart, that the greater and the stronger someone's character is, then the more that character, which requires zero talent, will amplify the skills that do require talent. That the harder, that when someone by their character is a hard worker, just that blue collar, put on your work boots every morning and get up and go to work. When you get that blue collar work ethic, well, it doesn't matter if you're in the weight room or you're in film, you're in the classroom, you're on the field. When you have that work ethic is going to drive you to get more out of what you do. When you're a person of integrity, you won't disqualify yourself by not keeping your word or holding to the standard, be it by what you do on the weekend or in the classroom or wherever that may be. And when you're service before self, and that's just a part of who you are, then you become the ultimate teammate, the one that every teammate wants. It's funny when I talk to student athletes and I ask them, I say, hey, describe to me the ideal teammate. Like if Elon Musk created a machine and he could just pop out the perfect teammate,
right.
What kind of teammate would you want? And inevitably they tell me hardworking, accountable, respectful, leadership. They usually ask for 10 things, and usually 10 out of 10, sometimes 9 out of 10. They all have nothing to do with talent. They're everything to do with character. Because intuitively, we understand better people make better teammates. Better teammates make better teams. Better teams are more successful. And so the work that I do now not only helps student athletes and coaches become the teammates that they want to be, that they would be successful in the game of sports, but we understand that these characteristics, these traits, they last beyond sports, and that it sets them up to be successful in the game of life. And as much as I want our student athletes to win in games, I want them to win in the game of life even more.
No, I love that. And I think I want to almost go back to what you were talking about at the beginning for people for young coaches like myself, who, you talked about how you were volunteering for those first 7 years as a player development coach, right? Like I'm sure those first 3-4 years, you had no idea what this was going to turn into. And, now there's like the comparison of like, oh, I'm just coaching here. I'm doing this right now. But like, if you have that kind of yes attitude, like, yes, this will work. Let's kind of work towards this. Like we can actually really create something that's, amazing and of service to others. And then there's the other part of it. It's just like teaching that work ethic and service before self and integrity. Those things are so important to teach young people. And I'd love to dive further into like how you teach those and how you make videos and help young people do that and turn it from like an idea and intellect into action.
Yeah, well, let's start here in this idea that I'm just a young coach. I'm just a coach that has 12 guys on my team. This idea of just a coach, there's not much that gets me fired up and frustrated in the world, but that's one thing that'll piss me off real quick, because there's no such thing in my mind as just a coach. When you think about what it is a coach does, okay, when you take serious the profession of coaching, especially at the secondary and middle school level, when you're working with students, the role of coach is quite possibly the most important role in America. that there are very few people who spend more time with students than coaches do. As I work with coaches across the country, man, my coaches, they spend more time with somebody else's kid than they do with their own kids. That they're waking up early and they're staying up late. The sacrifice that they go through, the training, the preparation, the certification, the expertise that is required, on top of their teaching responsibilities, on top of their family responsibilities, on top of, oh, wait a minute, we're not just coaching a game. We are driving buses. You're doing laundry. You're playing counselor. You're a father figure, a mother figure. You are navigating and refereeing high school drama. You are helping middle school students figure out deodorant and how to remember a stinking lock combination. The amount of things that a coach does is almost impossible to calculate. And on top of all of that, there's maybe no one more influential in shaping and forming the foundation of leadership and of character and of work ethic in the life of a young person than a coach. And that's done not just in their words. In fact, the words are really just the beginning. If you think about, and research shows us, if you think about a continuum of the impact of a coach to transfer, it's called life transfer skill, to transfer from athletics, these long shelf life skill sets, character, leadership, to take them from athletics and to put them into the game of life, to do nothing and to simply say, hey, watch me and do what I do. Like, I have great character. I'm a great leader. So just do what I do. That's a very implicit development. If you take the next step from modeling to then teaching, to where you begin to speak. So you not only model it, but you talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it. That's the next step. But even there, studies would show us that it's still pretty limited transfer. That to really get the impact that we want to do, we have to model, we teach, then we have to go through and we have to create opportunity within athletics to practice these ideas in athletics. And then once you give them the opportunity within that context, then you take the next step and you help them create the opportunities beyond sports. So to take the things that we practice in sports and then to apply them outside of sports. And that allows you to go from kind of this implicit to explicit development. And the number one factor that researchers have found, the limiting factor in how well student athletes transfer these skills is the coach. The coach is the number one limiting factor on how well those character and leadership and all of those traits pass through athletics and into life. And so this idea that we're just a coach is nonsense. That for many of our students, as a coach, you're going to be on their Mount Rushmore. You're going to be one of the foremost influential people in their lives. So the idea that it's just a coach is nonsense to me. That the comparison trap would have us look at what someone else does, would have the coach of a JV basketball team look and say, man, I'm not doing what Mackey's doing, so what I'm doing doesn't matter. Nonsense. Comparison has a way of making you feel too big or too small. Whereas humility, knowing who you are, so you don't have to prove who you are, has a way of keeping you the right size. And when you are that right size, then you're going to give the very best of you to the best of your kids right there. And that intrinsic drive is going to be the difference, because you're going to listen to your kids and you're going to know your kids and you're going to find out where your kids struggle, what they do well, what opportunities they need. And you're going to contextualize that character and leadership development to your kids in a way that will make it most impactful.
Yeah, I love the idea of that internal wisdom, and it begins within. And that I never thought about comparison as in thinking yourself as too big, which I actually think is a big challenge for athletes. And even when I play pickup basketball, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm better than these people, and then I'll stink it up, right? Like as soon as I start doing that, like I won't play well. And I think having that internal self-awareness and knowing who you are is so important, and helping kids and coaches develop that, and recognizing that being a coach it is so much more than just being a coach. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been I've been kind of pulled towards coaching. I kind of stumbled into it once I moved here in LA and ended up being like, okay, maybe this is something I was put here on the universe to do, to serve, to be able to teach, connect those dots of life lessons, of character development. And so with that, like, I'm curious for me as myself, like, I understand some of the ways of modeling it and role modeling it, but you're talking about like the opportunity to practice some of these skills in, a sports setting. What does that look like?
So I think we need to think about, as you are developing your curriculum, as you're developing what it looks like to train up students in your program, character and leadership. I think it's important to identify what the core values are for you, the core pillars. And it doesn't have to be very many. For me, there are 6. I call them the 6 pillars. And they're the only 6 things I talk about. And if you listen to any of the speeches I give, anytime I talk to student athletes, there are really only 6 things I talk about. And they're the 6 pillars. My curriculum is built on them. Tough people win. Integrity over everything. Growth follows belief. Excellence everywhere. Relentless effort. And service before self. And I chose those 6 not only because I believe that they're right, good, and true, but because as I've worked with teams from 6-man to national champions, I've found that whatever core values a team has, they can fit under the umbrella of those 6 pillars. And so then as we think about those pillars, whatever your pillars are, you have to define them in a contextualized way. That to have a Webster's dictionary definition of it doesn't do you much good. But to sit down with your student athletes and to ask them, what does it look like? What does this term, this idea mean to you? And to get the ideas and the nuances from each of your players. And if you got a small team, it's a lot easier. If you have a big team, you do it representatively. But you define those terms in ways that are nuanced to your team. And then from those, you create a team definition. And what's interesting is that definition can change from year to year as your team changes. That one way you could say is, no, this is what it means to be a part of the program, and you live into that. But another way is to say, no, we're going to keep this idea, but we're going to nuance the definition based on the team and the makeup that we have. And so you have that working definition that's agreed upon as the team. And then I think the thing that really allows you to really personalize it is to talk as a team about why these ideas are important to you. So as you've agreed upon these terms and you define these terms, I think it's important to personalize why those terms matter for you. So for example, we talk about service before self. If we were on a team and you said, Mackey, why does service before self? We've agreed upon this as a pillar of our program. We've defined this. Why does this matter to you? Well, I would say, Coach, I was born to a teenage mother. My mom was 16 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, father, older black man. We lived in a small Texas town where racism was far from gone. And person after person, statistician and researcher alike would look at me and say that I was going to be a failure. Less likely to graduate from high school, go to college, more likely to be arrested by my 18th birthday, and to live a life of poverty. They said I would be a failure. But my maternal grandparents chose to raise me. They chose to make me their own. They chose to sacrifice, to start over, to endure the talks behind their back, to endure the persecution of raising a mixed race child and all of this. And they worked hard and they gave their life, the last years of they gave the best of themselves in service that I might have a chance. And so when I talk about service before self, Coach, this isn't just some idea. Like, I'm sitting here today because that was modeled for me in my life. And by making it personal, a couple of things happen. All of a sudden, for me, I'm like, yeah, this isn't just an idea. All right. But what happens for you is you're like, wow, Mac, I didn't know that about you. Right. And then you begin to share with me. And I go, man, I didn't know that about you. And it gives us the opportunity to kind of walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And that vulnerability, that openness builds trust. And that trust leads to a sense of, hey man, I trusted you with this. And so now when you stop doing this, hold on, like we're breaking a contract right here. And it opens up the opportunity for accountability and the encouragement of confrontation. I don't know if you ever think about confrontation as an encouragement, but that's exactly what it can be. And so it allows us to bring that in. And then once we've made that personal and we've shared that with one another, then I think the last step that we need to do is we need to make some commitments to some actions of how we can live those out. And we sit down and say, okay, hey, if service before self is one of our pillars, we've talked about why it's important, then what are some actions that we can do starting today? And to make a list of actions and to brainstorm. And it could be 20 things. But the idea is that you would help students as they're developing and understanding what it means to be a servant, for example, to give them actions to say. Just like if you're going to expect that your student athletes call one another out, then you've got to equip them with language to call each other out in a helpful way. Or if you're going to expect them to encourage one another, you've got to equip them with phrases to encourage one another with. And at first, it will be kind of the canned. But as they get reps at it, then they're going to be able to take it and make it their own. And so I think we do the same thing with those core values, is we make some commitments and some actions that they can put into practice. Now, when we see that, we got to celebrate it. As a coach, you got to celebrate it. You've heard it many times, but what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so when we reward and celebrate and elevate people living out those commitments of our core values that we defined and agreed upon, then that's what's going to get celebrated. And so those are some of the things I would begin to think about as you're thinking about how do I do this with my team. Define as a team those values that matter. Give definitions to them. Talk about why they matter in a personal way, how they connect to a person's story. Make commitments and specific actions that they can do that will allow them to execute and exhibit those traits and then celebrate it.
That's powerful.
And then the next step, is then to create opportunities outside of sports to go live those out. So whether that's doing community service as a team, whatever the case may be, but to then, once you've built that opportunity within the program, then to go outside of it.
Yeah, and I'd love to dive more into that, but I just want to, kind of reiterate what you're saying, and I appreciate you for sharing it and making your value personal for the listeners as well. And I was kind of listening and imagining, right? Like, I think it gives players ownership over the values, right? Because otherwise, if you're talking about the Webster dictionary definition, it's just like, okay, this is coach's definition and this is coach's team. This is, right? There's no ownership. But when you help them kind of honestly articulate, you're working on those critical thinking skills, but also helping them connect it to a personal story. Okay, hard work. Sharing a similar story. I had my grandparents are from the Azores. They didn't speak a lick of English when they came here, and my grandfather was a lumberjack, and then my dad ended up building houses and building a successful business, and all sacrifice and service and hard work and ethic, and those things I'm tied to. And my mom's side is a similar one of service as well. So with that being said, I feel like I really like connecting it and making it personal, but I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on how and you touched on a little bit with community service, but I'd love for you to expand more on taking this character development, beyond the game of sports.
Yeah. So I think that when you look at the beyond the game, I think you want to think about, as I talk about these traits, have I thought, are they applicable, or how are they applicable outside of sports? And have I articulated that? Because if what we are teaching isn't applicable outside of sports, then what's the point in teaching it? Because we can teach things that will help them be successful in sports and be beyond. But if we're only teaching this, it's like we're wasting that opportunity. And so I think just even that forward thinking of, okay, how will this apply outside of sport? How does this allow them to live out? If they live out these pillars, what kind of person would they become? How would they be known? How would they be talked about if they live these core values out? And then you find opportunities, community service, whether that's, this happens at my son and daughter's school. The varsity football team comes down to the elementary school every game day, and they're in their jerseys and they greet the students and they open the door and they high five them and they bring great energy, because a big thing in our town, we're a small town, is school pride, called Panther Pride. And that's something that they talk about at the elementary level, the middle school level, the high school level, is that Panther Pride. And so when those football players are opening up the doors, high-fiving kids, welcome them onto campus, that builds that sense of Panther Pride. And that is an overflow of the things they talk about in athletics, in the classroom, and in life. I think about just making these connections. I had a coach send me a message just last night, actually. And she said, this week our lesson was 5 Ps. Prior preparation permits proper performance. And so we were talking about that lesson in the curriculum. And she said, we talked about and we prepared ourselves to go for 5 games, 5 sets, we prepared conditioning. We prepared mentally. We prepared and what the rotations would look like. All these things we talked about, what it would look like to go to game 5. And then she said, we got there and we went to game 5. And this game lasted so long. She said it started at like 7 and it went till 10 p.m. She's like, but we were able to be successful because we practiced the 5 Ps. Prior preparation permits proper performance. And then she said something that just warmed my heart. And she said, this is going to be one of those lessons that my students are not going to forget for a long time. Because as we were walking through just the struggle of the game, we brought up the thing that we talked about in practice. We said the 5 Ps. And that gave us such confidence to say, hey, ladies, we prepared for this. We've been talking about this all week long. Now all we got to do is go and execute. And I think that the number of times students have told me, the lessons I learned in football or basketball or soccer, he's like, when my coach told me this, or the way my coach treated me in the situation, I didn't know it then, but now all these years later, when I found myself in a similar situation, what I went back to? The thing my coach did.
That's huge. I mean, and that's applicable, right, for when they graduate, whether it's high school, college athletics, maybe they play professionally, but they're in a workplace, and they're challenged, with, let's say it's a presentation, right? But if they know that they prepared and they're ready to go, right, that's that life skill that they learn from athletics, and that was taught from, making it applicable. I think that's a big thing that maybe I'm actually learning right now too, is sometimes like assuming that when you teach something that like applies to life, but you don't talk about how it also applies to life too. Do you find that some coaches do that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to think, remember the continuum. And I need to think about the researcher that founded this idea, but you think about this continuum: model and talk, model, talk, and practice in sports, model, talk, practice in sports, connect outside of sports. That the whole continuum, it takes all of it. But where most coaches will stop is at the talking, because the favorite sound that they have in their life is their own voice, and they think just because I said it that they're going to practice it. Well, that's not true, right? We've got to give the opportunity. We've got to teach them how to do it, and so on. I'll give you a great example. It's a young man I'm so proud of. His name's Donovan. And he was a senior quarterback, and one of the lessons we'd done, it talked about not only how to respond when you get called out, but how to call out those on your team who aren't living up to the standard, whatever the standard may be. And after having walked through that lesson, he said, we've got a star running back. He's a junior, junior, and he's got all the talent in the world, but he's a terrible teammate. And we're kind of to the point where we would almost rather risk losing without him being on the team than winning with him on the team. So there's very much some division on there. But nobody had talked to him about it. Nobody had said anything. So they've been talking all these things behind their back. but I hadn't said anything face to face. And we talked about the rule of three, that if you think something about someone or say something to someone else about a person 3 times, then the fourth time you have an obligation to say it face to face. But if you can't get over it in 3 tries, then the fourth time it becomes your responsibility. It becomes your issue to go say something to them face to face. And so he said, we were talking about that, thinking about that. And I just realized I've talked to my teammates, I've talked to all these people, but I've never talked to him about it. And so what he did was he invited him to dinner one night. They went out to Burgers, and he said, we were sitting there across from him. And I remember I didn't want to be a red marker, because we talk a lot about, we think sometimes holding people accountable or coaching them up means being a red marker, like on that grade school paper where that English paper where you got it wrong, there's all the red, missed a comma here, circle there, X there, all the red marker. Sometimes we think that's what it means to hold somebody accountable. Parents are the worst at this, by the way. Parents talking to their kids after games. They think they're engaging with them, being helpful and encouraging, and all they're doing is red marker, red marker, red marker. It's not helpful. So he said, I knew I didn't want to do that, because that's what we talked about. So what I did was I said, look, man, here's what I see in you. You have an unbelievable talent. You're getting recruiting letters out the wazoo. I wish I had the talent in my whole body that you have in your pinky. Man, you're incredible. And we're a better team because of your talent. He said, but here's the deal. He's like, man, and I just don't think anybody has shared this with you. And so I'm gonna share something with you. And I want you to know I'm telling you this because I feel like you're my brother. And I care about you and I want the best for you. He said, man, you're a great talent, but you're not acting like a very good teammate. He said, there are guys on the team that don't trust you, that they look at the way that you exempt yourself from things that everyone else is doing. Other guys are busting their butts, and you don't have to work as hard as we do to be as good as you are. And it's like, but that lack of effort is noticed, and it's causing a division, man. And look, we can't reach our goals this year if you don't become the teammate that I know you can be. And next year, when you're a senior, man, you're set up to be a team captain, but it's not going to happen, man. And I want more for you than that. And man, he sat down, he just had this genuine heart to heart. I was so proud, man, a high school senior talking to a high school junior. And they had this conversation, man, and it was a turning point in their relationship. Because this kid, he knew he wasn't a good teammate. He knew he was relying on his talent, but nobody had ever called him on it. And so when this kid, Donovan, called him on it, he said, okay, well, wait a minute. Like, maybe this dude actually cares enough about me to tell me the truth. And they became better friends. Doesn't always work out that way, but it did in this moment. I was so proud of him. I thought, man, if he could learn to encourage by confrontation in sport, man, what a skill moving forward in the workplace and in the game of life.
Yeah, I think what I hear there is a few things that I really feel like he didn't label him as you are a bad teammate. You said you are not acting like a good teammate, right? Not saying like end all be all, you're a bad teammate, right? You can become a good teammate and you can come here. And it's almost, I feel like the way you worded it is like he was inviting him into the team and like saying, hey, like these are some conversations that are going on, not labeling him like you're a bad teammate. We don't want you here, right? But we love you. We want you here, but we need you to pick up the effort, right? And so, and be a part of this so we can become something, and then you can become a leader. And obviously that's eventually going to transfer when he goes and plays in college, and that's a lot higher level, right? He's probably going to be, when he's competing at running back with other running backs, like his attitude may make or break whether he's getting 20 snaps or 10. And so that's a big deal. And that then goes to the NFL. And so it's all kind of trickling down is from what I hear. And I think a big thing that I've been trying to work with some of the coaches that I oversee is I really like what you're talking about. If reward and repeat, right? Like if they are doing a great job at something with character development or skill, then you have to reward them. And then that becomes what they repeat. And so I'd love for you to like expand.
Yeah. I'll expand in this way. So I had a coach come to me, and they said, hey, here's how we find our team captains. And I forget the name of the coach, but basically they laid out the leadership traits, the core values, and then they had the players and the coaches rank players and grade players, peer evaluation on those traits. They said, okay, if these are the traits that we value, who on the team lives these things out the best? And then those with the best scores became the ones that were awarded the positions of leadership. And I thought that was a really interesting, way to go about it, as opposed to just having seniors or just having certain talented position guys to go. And not to say that you can't have seniors and talented position guys and guys who are graded out well by their peers, that you could have a combination of the all. But that's an example of valuing your core values, is by grading one another. Even had a coach, a great friend, who would have the players grade the coaches based on their core values, to say, hey, as a coaching staff, do your coaches live out our values? And that was a part of the coaching staff evaluation at the end of the year. So it wasn't just top down, but it was player to coach and coach to player.
Yeah, that's big. I know sometimes I ask for feedback from my players, and they look at me like I have like I'm some mythical creature, because they never get asked that. They're like, feedback for you? Why? I'm like, I'm trying to become a better coach, just like you're trying to become a better player, right? And so maybe I need to be a little bit more specific in that and tie it and relate it to values.
Yeah, think about in year-end exit interviews or senior exit interviews, sitting down with those that are transitioning out of the program and asking them, the questions that matter, and there's a certain sense that when we ask the question, hey, is there anything I can do better? Sometimes it comes across as a false humility, because there's this sense of like, well, man, like, can I really tell you the truth? Do you really want to know the truth? Right. And so then asking, okay, what are specific ways? What are intentional ways that we can get some of that feedback? Well, asking, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, how did this coach do on these core values? What were the things that coach did that were most helpful to you? What were the things that were least helpful? If you could change something about your experience in the program, what would you change? Things like this, where you're inviting them not to stroke your ego, right, but instead you're inviting them to take ownership in what will be left behind and how the program will grow. Is a different way to go about that.
Yeah, I think it's a little more specific too, right? And it's almost like giving them a little more ownership over, the growth and the process and the scale, and like, it's just a little more specific at the end of the day. Like, you have to be specific and genuine about that feedback, which I remember listening to your previous podcast on the Coach Forward, is that that's one of the most powerful things, is specific and genuine feedback. And, as we wrap up this conversation, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the number one challenge that you were talking about athletes are facing right now across America that you surveyed.
Yeah. So as I talk with student athletes, again and again, they tell me, man, mental health is one of the biggest issues that they're facing. The anxiety, the worry, the pressure, the depression, the riding the roller coaster, even the suicidal ideation. These ideas and these things are not, they're not at arm's distance. They're very close and personal for student athletes. And I think that obviously you want to make sure you're connected to the professionals, the mental health professionals in your world, be that the counselors at your kid's school, or those that are, in your local community and that you can work with. But I think there are things that we can also think about that will help us help students. For example, when I asked them, I said, what does it feel like when you say you're struggling with mental health? One student said, man, it feels like I'm always striving, but never achieving. Nothing is ever enough. It's like I live on this hamster wheel, and I could do 99 things right, but all I can think about is the one thing that I did wrong. And that one thing is overwhelming. And then I work and I work and I push to get that one thing right. And then something else goes wrong. And I have no space to celebrate the 99 things that I got right, plus the thing that I got right. And then the second time, because there's something new that's wrong. And in an attempt to always be growing and always be getting better, we've suffocated the space to let students be proud of themselves and to celebrate how far they've come. and to let kids be kids and be excited about what they're doing in this pursuit for college scholarships, getting drafted, and all these things. And we forgot to let kids be kids, to let them be proud of themselves. And that's why one of the things I encourage not only student athletes, but parents to do is to have what I call a meaningful check-in at least once a week with themselves or with their student athletes. And a meaningful check-in is you ask 3 questions. Number 1, what are you proud of? This week, what are you proud of? And to, as a parent, take note of the things that they say. At first, it's going to be hard for them to answer. All right. They're going to stumble and mumble and fumble through some words because students aren't asked to be proud of themselves very often. But over time, as you continue to ask this question, they'll learn to be proud of themselves and they'll be able to communicate that and learn to articulate that. And I think the importance of that is that I'm convinced growth comes from pride, not from shame. But too often what student athletes will do is they'll try to shame themselves into growth by using negative self-talk. The worst language a kid will ever use is the language they use for themselves when they screw up. They'll cuss themselves out up one side and down another, trying to shame themselves into growth. Never happens. Doesn't work that way. I think that growth comes from a sense of pride, of knowing your value and worth, knowing that value and worth is not found on the other side of accomplishment, but is found right here. The fact that there's breath in your lungs. And so to help them build that pride muscle, the good pride, and celebrating them for that. And taking that opportunity to encourage them with the things that you are proud of them for. The second question is, what surprised you this week? And the value of this question is it invites student athletes to be curious about their world, to not have to be right about everything all the time. Because that's typically what gets celebrated in our world. Those that know all the answers, that are one step ahead. You think about in TV, we will cheer for a bad guy if the bad guy is one step ahead of the good guy. We just want to cheer for the one that already knows, that's thinking 3 steps ahead. But when we ask and celebrate being curious, then it allows us to kind of stay humble, to go, I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming, but I learned from it. Man, I was so, my heart was filled. I didn't expect the fans to cheer so loud. They showed up, they had a sign there. I didn't expect that at all, but man, it filled my heart up. Just the sense of being allowed to be surprised and to be curious, to not have to know all the answers, to not have to have everything figured out, but to go in and to want to learn more and engage deeper is a fun question to ask. And then the third question is, what did you learn this week that you want to put into practice next week? And the wording of that really matters, because oftentimes what we'll say is, what did I get wrong this week that I want to get right next week? Remember, where you focus, you finish. When I focus on what I did wrong, it's more often that I'm going to carry the wrong forward than I'm going to make the right forward. But to say, what did I learn this week, says, because this week is past, whether I won or I lost, I was my best or my worst, the only usefulness of this past week is as a classroom. So I learn, and now I want to apply moving forward for next week. That allows students to step in and to acknowledge that sometimes things don't go right. And yet, you can still learn and grow from it and be made better because of it if you choose. And so that's what I call a meaningful check-in. And those are just some conversations that you can have that can help students get off that hamster wheel. Get away from that anxiousness and that sense of striving but never achieving, and just being proud of who they are and where they're at and what they've done, not finding their value and worth in their performance, but finding that in something bigger than themselves, like a purpose.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like the comparison trap is even greater for young athletes, because they're on social media and they're like, oh, this athlete's already, he can make 10 threes in a row and I can only make 5, right? And so this gives them the opportunity to be like, what were you proud of? What were you surprised? And sometimes maybe like they surprise themselves, or their teammates surprise themselves, and, connecting to those values, and then, asking, what did you learn this week that you can apply to next week, instead of, what did you do wrong, right? That way they're able to be like, we're all works in progress. Me and you are works in progress, right? Like I'm going to probably learn what I could have done better in this podcast to interview better in my next podcast. So just inviting that continuous growth. So for our last segment, what are your final words of, advice for the young coaches and parents? And then where can people find you and connect to your message?
Yeah. So I think that the greatest gift that we can give young people is the opportunity to build a championship character through athletics, that they can find their purpose through sport, not in it. Mm-hmm. And as adults, we have to be careful, very, very careful, that we don't get it mixed up. That in our excitement and fervor to support them in their success in sport, that we don't elevate success in sport over success in the game of life. That I would rather lose a game and win a kid than win a game and lose a kid. And I would hope that that would be the mantra of all coaches. And that's not to say that you don't want to win the game.
Right.
It's to say that you want to win the kid even more. As a parent, that's not to say you don't want your kid to get that scholarship. It's that you want your kid to be successful in the game of life more than you want them to get that scholarship. Too many adults, parents and coaches alike, will sacrifice a kid's character, investing in a kid, caring for a kid in the name of a victory. And I think that's really short-sighted. And so I'd encourage you to stay away from that. As far as being connected, you can find kind of all the work that I do, my speaking with teams and businesses, my curriculum, as well as my Wall Street Journal best-selling book, The Locker Room, which talks about a lot of these ideas that we discussed today, specifically the 6 pillars, and applies it in a teaching story to a team, and to a situation. You can find all that at mackeyspeaks.com. The book is called The Locker Room, How Great Teams Heal Hurt, Overcome Adversity, and Build Unity. And the companion workbook guide, the curriculum guide that we wrote to go alongside the book that follows chapter by chapter and is great and designed for teams. It gives key takeaways, a deep dive teaching, reflection questions, and exercises for you as an individual and for you as a team. It's going to be made available November 16th, wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, independent booksellers, Amazon, wherever you get books, you can get that workbook guide alongside the book, The Locker Room. And would love for folks to be able to pick that up and work through that and work on not only building their core values, but living those out and doing so in a way that heals hurt and builds unity.
I love it. I'll be purchasing that soon. I appreciate you so much for your time today, Stephen. Thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom with our audience.
You bet. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.